Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reshuffles his cabinet as Russia continues its relentless air attacks, with Lviv being the latest target. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba among those replaced. The United States pushes for a final truce in Gaza as it charges Hamas leaders, including Yahya Sinwar, over the October 7 attack that triggered an Israeli assault on the Palestinian enclave. The Grenfell Tower inquiry publishes its final report into one of the UK's deadliest residential fires, blames failures by government, building industry and fire brigade for the 72 deaths in 2017. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Singapore for a two-day visit aimed at enhancing strategic ties with New Delhi's sixth largest trading partner. The leaders of South Korea and New Zealand condemn North Korea's weapons program and Russia's invasion of Ukraine as they meet in Seoul for the first summit between the two countries in 9 years. Hello and welcome. We start with Nigeria. Now, the list of crises that the West African country faces is only getting longer. Nigeria, which is one of the world's largest oil producers, is running out of fuel. Citizens in major Nigerian cities have been queuing up for hours at fuel stations amid the scarcity. Now, the long queues have resulted in traffic jams and operational challenges for weeks now.
Civil servant, I'm supposed to be at work right now. As you can see, I'm not at work. I'm at the filling station trying to get a fuel. And it's very, very bad.
In the latest, Nigeria's state-run oil company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, the NNPC, has acknowledged that a financial strain has been hampering its supplies. The firm says due to financial hiccups, it is unable to import petrol. With this, the firm acknowledged the local media reports that it has piled up debt of $6 billion, resulting in fuel scarcity. However, these comments also come a month after the NNPC declared a record profit of about $2 billion, but warned that it was covering for shortfalls in government's petrol import bill. Now, the fuel shortages have caused major frustrations among the public, which rely on petrol and diesel for their vehicles as well as to power their generators. Amid the crisis, fuel sellers could be seen hawking in jerry cans, while some buyers are bribing their way in to make a purchase. Many stations were also shut in parts of the commercial capital, Lagos.
It's shameful. I've been out of this country for 7 years. And I still come back here to queue and bribe people just to get into the filling station to buy fuel. There's no word to describe what's happening in this country. It's just very shameful. That's the only word I can use.
Non one knows the day NNPC will get fuel. Every day, they keep postponing. NNPC told us that there is fuel, but days after we are all still queuing up for petrol.
Nigeria is an OPEC producer. It was reported as the largest oil producer in Africa in 2023. Despite this, it imports most of its fuel needs, and this is because it has very little working refining capacity. Fuel scarcities have been particularly more frequent since President Bola Tinubu removed the costly fuel subsidies last year. The subsidy, introduced in the 1970s, had kept the fuel prices cheap for decades, but it was removed very abruptly, causing anger among the public already dealing with a cost of living crisis. Fuel prices have tripled since Tinubu introduced his reforms. Frustrated Nigerians, who are also battling food inflation at 40%, took to the streets last month to protest against the economic crisis. Now, Nigeria's oil sector has also struggled for years, as most of its state-run refineries operate far below their capacity because of poor maintenance. Apart from this, the country also faces an oil theft crisis. As per reports, Nigeria lost about 620 million barrels of crude oil, valued at $46 billion between 2009 and 2020 alone. This has damaged government finances and limited Nigeria's output and exports. Now, those stealing this oil are believed to be unemployed Nigerian youth and also various militant groups. Which brings us to another major challenge that the country is facing. From bandits to Islamist terrorists, Nigeria is facing a major security crisis. In the latest, at least 81 people have died and several have been reported missing after an attack by suspected Boko Haram terrorists in northeast Nigeria. The terrorists also burned many shops and houses. Nigeria has been facing an Islamist insurgency since 2015, killing over 40,000 people. But things have not eased. During Bola Tinubu's tenure, multiple attacks and kidnappings by terrorists continue, while the country reels from various other challenges. So from economy to security, it's a multi-headed crisis for Africa's most populous nation. What is the government's plan to navigate through it? To discuss further, we have with us Ayotunde Abiodun, an analyst at SBM Intelligence. He joins us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'll jump right into the questions. What are the primary factors contributing to the current acute fuel shortage in Nigeria? And how have the recent policy changes, such as the removal of the fuel subsidies, impacted the situation?
All right. It is important to lay this background. In his inaugural message as the president of Nigeria in May 2023, President Tinubu announced that the fuel subsidy was gone, as it was no longer sustainable. The premise then was that there was a need to alleviate financial strain on the national budget and redirect funds to other sectors. And what we saw was an immediate spike in fuel prices in May 2023, and that led to widespread public discontent and increased hardship for Nigerians who are now facing an higher living cost. However, it's important to point out that fuel subsidies have not been totally taken out. There is still some form of subsidy payment by the Nigerian government. And if we make recourse to the National Oil Company's financial statement for 2023, where it was revealed that the federal government owes the company about 5.1 trillion naira for the financial year. And the breakdown of that 5.1 trillion naira showed that 3.3 trillion was for subsidy costs between January and May 2023, while 1.8 trillion naira was for energy security expenses between August and December 2023. And in reality, what we have is that the first subsidy still exists. And also, the factor in the fact that the NNPC has come out to admit that it is battling a heavy debt burden, owing suppliers more than $6 billion, and that is threatening its operation. And so this has been the key driver for the current fuel shortage that the country is facing. Suppliers are wary of supplying the country in light of the country's debt, and this also led to the NNPC retail hub increasing fuel prices just on Tuesday in a bid to stabilize its finances.
Yeah. I want to get to that in a minute, Ayotunde, but first, how is this fuel shortage affecting the daily life and the economic activities in Nigeria, particularly in the major cities like where you are in Lagos and also in Abuja?
Thank you. The situation has significantly disrupted daily life and economic activities. It has resulted in long queues at filling stations, with many motorists waiting for hours just to purchase petrol. And this scarcity has also led to increased transportation costs for Nigerians, with prices doubling on many routes. And this has severely impacted commuters and delivery services. We also see that businesses that are dependent on fuel for their operations, such as logistics and transportation services, are facing significant challenges. Many filling stations have also shut down due to the lack of supply, causing commercial activities to come to an halt in various sectors. And we're seeing a narrative whereby the higher fuel prices are worsening the cost of living crisis, affecting everything from food prices to service costs. And then you've also alluded to this earlier in your introduction that this scarcity has fueled a black market for fuel. And this illegal trade has worsened the economic burden on Nigerians. And we also predict that this will trigger a higher inflation rate, further straining household budgets and pushing more Nigerians into poverty. And more crucially is the fact that there is growing public frustration with the potential for protests as Nigerians are dissatisfied with this situation.
Yes.
All in all, it's a very challenging
we saw those
environment for
protests
both
last
individuals
month.
and businesses.
Yes. And what measures are being taken by the Nigerian government and by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, the state-run oil firm, to address the fuel shortage, considering they're facing such financial strain and now they can't import fuel?
So, great question. So the first thing we saw the National Petroleum Company do was to, on Sunday, publicly acknowledge that it was facing significant financial challenges with debt to oil traders to the tune of about $6 billion. This situation has severely impacted its ability to be able to import the necessary fuel to meet the country's demands. It's important to point out that this is a very interesting development.
Oh, we seem to have lost Ayotunde. Thank you very much to our guest there for bringing us all the latest details out of Nigeria. Now moving on to our next story. The China-Africa Summit has officially kicked off with Chinese President Xi Jinping hosting a grand banquet and a welcome dinner for leaders of 50 African nations. Xi Jinping will open the 9th Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit on Thursday, where he will deliver a keynote address. The 3-yearly forum will set the course of China-Africa relations up until 2027. The Chinese president has said that the summit will open a new chapter in China-Africa relations. He has been holding bilateral meetings with several African leaders and has also offered $60 billion in funding over the next 3 years. Xi added there were no political strings attached, but warned against spending on vanity projects.
At the summit, on behalf of the Chinese government, President Xi Jinping will further summarize the development of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, present China's initiatives, and measures to strengthen China-Africa cooperation in the future. He will work with African leaders to plan a new blueprint for China-Africa cooperation, leading the Global South in a new direction. The collective rise of the Global South, represented by China and Africa, is profoundly influencing the course of world history.
So why has China renewed its race for Africa? Well, there are multiple reasons, the biggest being that the continent has become the latest geopolitical playing field, with US, Europe, Russia and China vying for influence and also aiming to tap into Africa's resources. While the West and Russia have been wrestling for security ties with African countries, China's involvement in the continent has been very systematic. Beijing has been investing in Africa for over 2 decades now. It made significant inroads into Africa under President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. It is already the largest investor in Africa. Now, through this summit, Africa's biggest bilateral lender, China, wants to slim down its investment portfolio and realign its relations with the developing economies. Beijing is pushing Xi Jinping's new mantra of small and beautiful projects instead of big-ticket infrastructure. In the 2021 China-Africa Summit, Xi Jinping pledged to support 10 projects to improve interconnectivity of African states. This year, China is expected to urge African leaders to absorb more Chinese goods in exchange for pledges of loans and investment. China could also pledge to increase the amount available to African central banks and businesses through credit lines after committing $10 billion at the last summit.
China will continue to deepen infrastructure cooperation with African countries and the African Union, jointly build and operate the major landmark projects that have already been started, and plan and promote a new batch of cooperation projects based on the economic and social development needs of African countries. China will continue to strengthen digital infrastructure construction, deepen cooperation in the fields of digital economy and artificial intelligence, jointly implement green development actions, vigorously advocate green and low-carbon concepts, and practice the concept of green, coordinated and sustainable development.
This is what China could offer, but what do the African nations seek from this summit? Africa is looking for quicker financing solutions to a growing debt crisis. Earlier this week, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa met with Xi Jinping and said that he wanted to narrow his country's trade deficit with China. China has been making high-interest loans to low-income African nations to fund development of infrastructure projects. Now, it has been criticized for its debt-laden overseas projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, in the latest, Chinese and African officials rejected this criticism as they met in Beijing. African leaders are also seeking fresh job-creating investment pledges and are hoping for assurances and projects proposed in 2021 Dakar summit will be completed. In 2021, China had pledged to buy African goods worth $300 billion. However, this pledge has not been met yet. China is looking at Africa to gain significant advantage over the US and Europe in global renewable energy race. Africa is home to several important minerals which are needed to create renewable technologies, like copper, cobalt, and lithium, which are key ingredients in battery manufacture. Chinese mining presence in Africa is much lower than Western presence as of now. It is concentrated in 5 countries, including Guinea, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. This year's forum is the first in-person summit since the COVID-19 pandemic. China and delegates from Africa will begin discussions over 2 documents: the Action Plan for 2024 to 27 and a report on the implementation of the last summit in Dakar. Both of these documents will be finalized and signed by the end of the summit. Over years, Africa's vast resources have helped to fuel China's transformation into an economic powerhouse. As China and delegates from Africa begin discussions, the summit will certainly be watched closely by Beijing's competitor in the resource-rich continent. And shifting focus to Uganda, Uganda's main opposition leader has been allegedly shot in the leg by the police. The pop star turned politician Bobi Wine has been seriously injured and will undergo surgery as per his lawyer. His party said that he was shot in the leg on Tuesday as he returned from visiting one of their lawyers in the town of Bulindo. Now, Wine and his entourage were then allegedly surrounded by military and police officers who began firing live bullets and tear gas canisters. His lawyer says that he will undergo surgery to remove suspected fragments from a tear gas canister, which he said appeared to be deliberately targeted to harm him. The police, meanwhile, said that officers had attempted to block Wine and his team from marching down a road, and this resulted in an altercation where Bobby Wine sustained injuries. Police say an investigation would be conducted to clarify the facts. However, Bobby Wine's party, the National Unity Platform, asserts that he was shot. Now, the party shared videos and photos on social media showing Wine writhing in pain and bleeding from a wound. Bobby Wine is a major critic and opponent of the veteran president, Yoweri Museveni, who has been ruling Uganda for nearly 4 decades. Wine finished runner-up in the 2021 presidential election behind Museveni. The former musician has amassed huge support among the youth in Uganda, and his party holds more seats than any other opposition party in the National Assembly. Museveni's government has been accused by opponents and human rights activists of stifling the opposition. Just last month, several opposition members in Uganda were arrested for terrorism charges. The country's security forces have a long history of pursuing political opponents of Museveni. However, the president denies that he crushes dissent. Museveni is close to the Western nations, but his authoritarian stance has been called out by the Allies. The United States has expressed its concern on the latest incident, saying that violence against opposition voices means the democratic space is shrinking in Uganda. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Senegal is witnessing an exciting shift as women venture into the world of beatmaking. At the forefront of this movement is Aminata Thiam, a trailblazer who is not just making beats, but also breaking barriers. In the bustling city of Dakar, Thiam is empowering a new generation of female beatmakers, teaching them to create their own rhythms and challenge the status quo. Our final story will get you all the details.
Senegal is often hailed as one of the most stable nations in Africa, providing its people with the freedom to explore and experiment with their careers. Lately, Senegalese women have been diving into the world of beatmaking, a field traditionally dominated by men. Leading this movement is the dynamic Aminata Thiam. She is known by her catchy moniker, Miami the I-Girl. The name itself is a clever blend of 2 languages, English and Wolof. The meaning is the girl who can, and it's a fitting title for a woman determined to change the game. Thiam's beatmaking classes are held in a cozy classroom hidden within the streets of Dakar's Wakam neighborhood.
Women are not really represented in these kinds of fields. I think it's a good initiative on Aminata's part to want to put women forward.
But what exactly is beatmaking? The evolution of music has changed a lot of things for good and bad. Now beatmaking is a craft where creativity meets technology, allowing artists to build entire tracks without ever strumming a guitar or tapping a drum. Currently, Thiam has 5 female students under her wing, all of whom are beginning to create their own beats using digital software. After just 6 weeks of classes, their progress has been remarkable, hence leaving Thiam beaming with pride. Thanks to the rise of accessible beatmaking software, this art form has gained serious traction in recent years. Thiam refers to beatmaking as the art of making beats and creating rhythm. However, despite the growing interest, traditional and conservative views still cast a shadow over these aspiring female beatmakers. As a result, women remain vastly underrepresented in this field in Senegal, with only 3 female beatmakers in the entire country, according to Thiam.
If we see more women doing this work, this will encourage other women to start doing this work. So if we make it a priority to train women who are capable of going far in this industry, this will encourage other women to join us.
Yet, hope is on the horizon. The gender demographics in Senegal are nearly even, with men and women each making up roughly 50% of the population. Thiam is optimistic that more women will eventually break through in beatmaking, just as they have in other fields.
There aren't women beatmakers. We need to train other women, so the ecosystem can be a little balanced, okay? We need composers not just for music, but for audiovisual work, for cinema.
Interestingly, hip-hop itself found its way to Senegal through the middle class before becoming a voice for the masses. Today, experts estimate that 80% of the stars in Senegal's urban culture scene come from working-class neighborhoods.
There aren't that many women in the hip-hop industry, even though according to the last census with the National Agency of Statistics and Demography, men and women in Senegal have more or less the same numbers, about 50% each. So for me, in terms of the democratization of urban cultures, we have a lot of work to do to have young women start taking part in this culture, to not be scared.
So what's the future for Senegalese women in beatmaking? Well, with pioneers like Miami the I-Girl at the helm, the beats will keep dropping. And soon, the rhythm of change may just echo across the entire nation, and women will begin to make some serious noise.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual. My name is Utsav Parekh and here are the top stories of the day. A Russian missile strike has devastated the Ukrainian city of Poltava. The deadly attack killed at least 51 people and injured more than 270. Two ballistic missiles targeted a military